All right, so the director of the very hyped horror movie Barbarian from 2022 is back again with a new horror movie, this time with 10 times the budget. And this go around, this movie is called Weapons, which is actually also getting quite a bit of hype. It was on my most anticipated list of the year, and it currently sits at 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, is Weapons overhyped, or is it actually that good? Well, let's talk about it. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mad Blood. And first of all, let me know down in the comments down below if you've seen Weapons. What did you think about it? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Were you a fan of Barbarian? Were you not a fan? Let me know. So like I said, it seemed like a lot of people really enjoyed Barbarian when it came out in 2022. It's just one of those movies that we get pretty much every year that doesn't have a huge budget. It didn't have a huge marketing campaign or anything like that, but it just really popped for a lot of people. Personally, though, I thought Barbarian was just kind of okay. I thought, especially in that first half of the movie, the acting wasn't all that great, and I thought the story just overall, especially in that first half, was pretty basic as hell. Yeah, the second half did pick up in that movie. I thought it was pretty decent in that second half, but I feel like it's one of those movies where the actual movie and the story isn't really all that unique or all that interesting to me personally. So what it tries to do is it just tries to gross you out as much as they possibly can, hoping that will work. And obviously that did work for a lot of people, but there was enough there to make me interested in Zach Cregger's next project to kind of see how his work would evolve. Then you mix in this cast, this type of a story, especially for a dad like me, and then also this setting of this typical kind of town in America, this American suburbia, I thought was also something that really made me interested in this movie. And also, I gotta say too, not spoiling pretty much everything in this movie in the trailers, like so many companies have loved to do over the years recently, especially. You guys are beautiful for not spoiling too much. I love you. Speaking of spoilers, this video will be spoiler free. Now, I might do a spoiler video as well. I just kind of need to think about if the twists and turns and the reveal at the end of this movie are worth doing a totally separate video for. I'll think about that for a little bit, but again, this video in particular will be spoiler free. And so basically the premise of Weapons is this movie takes place in this town in Pennsylvania, and 17 kids from the same class simultaneously run out of their house and vanish at 2:17 in the morning on the same night. And now the town basically has to figure out and piece together the clues of what happened to these kids. And like I mentioned just a second ago, I think the setting for this movie really worked for me, and I think they did a good job just executing just the idea of transporting me into this town in Pennsylvania. It made me feel like I was there. You know, you're in the hallways at school, you're in the classroom, you're in the meetings with the school and with the town, you're at the police station, you're downtown, you're at the other important places in this town. You're really getting to know the town in a little bit of a way. It kind of feels just like your normal American town, you know, nothing glamorous, but it's a nice little town that feels like this kind of an American dream, which I think will always be a great setting for kind of a tragedy like this, or just portraying a mystery type of a story, because it's very relatable to a lot of people if you grew up in suburbia. I mean, it worked in shows like Stranger Things. We've seen it a million times before. And I think that type of a setting and that type of a story to set a tragedy like this, I think will always work. And I do think in this movie, they did execute that well. And with that, I think the music in this movie plays into the setting for this movie really, really well. A lot of the important scenes in this movie, there's very little music. It's just kind of the natural sounds of the town or the neighborhood. It's kind of like when you see in those memes, the noises of your childhood and what those sound like. You know, the sounds you'd hear when you're walking home from school, or if you're waking up in the middle of the night, you know, to take a piss. They kind of let the moments organically breathe and become itself. They don't just slam your ears with scary music trying to convince you and bash you over the head that, yes, this is supposed to be a scary movie. We're going to remind you this is supposed to be scary. No, in this movie, in a lot of the big scenes, they let the script and the acting and just the mood and the atmosphere of the certain scene make you feel unsettled instead of just like bashing you over the head with a big sign that says, "This is a horror movie, by the way." No, they just let everything kind of do it on its own. Now, with that said, though, I don't think this movie is really all that scary. I mean, as a dad, obviously having one of your kids basically just disappear is pretty damn scary, of course, but I really don't think this movie overall is like a really, really scary movie. I look at this movie as more of like a mystery thriller throughout most of it. Yes, there is definitely some horror elements in this movie without question, and definitely some gore as well. But yeah, I think the majority of the movie I would look at as more of like a mystery thriller. I also enjoyed how this movie took this approach of, okay, these are the people affected by what happened here. So we're going to have these chapters kind of showing each person's perspective of that. I think that mostly did work for me because especially in the first half of this movie, there are some moments where things kind of bounce around a little bit. And I'm kind of sitting there like, what the hell am I even watching? But then we get these kind of small time jumps here and there that kind of tie up some of those loose ends. You get to see some of those moments that you saw earlier in the movie, but you get to see it from a different perspective. And it's not like one of those moments where it just feels like the camera is over there and you're just seeing it from the camera's perspective. No, it very much feels like it's the POV of some of the important characters in the story, which I think also makes a lot of the small details earlier in the movie feel a little bit more intentional, because when you first see them, you don't really think they're important at all. You don't really care, like, oh, maybe somebody just did this thing, or they were just kind of getting harassed by a random person. No, it takes a lot of those moments and then ties them into something important throughout the story, and it feels more intentional. I don't know, personally, I always like that when they're able to pull off like different perspectives and kind of little flashbacks and fast forwards, especially in a mystery movie where you're trying to piece together these small clues. It's cool to see kind of how things are unfolding from all these different perspectives. And speaking of characters, what is also crazy about this movie is they pretty much had to recast this entire movie from top to bottom because of the labor strikes that happened in 2023. And on one hand, yeah, do I think Pedro Pascal would have done a good job in this movie playing the character that Josh Brolin did? Yeah, he would have done a good job, and Pedro's a very talented actor without question, but there is a part of me that is so happy that Pedro was not casted in this movie because, like I said, he's very talented, but Pedro, we have just seen way too much of you, man. Like, can you just take a break for a couple years? Please. But Josh Brolin, what a legend, man. I mean, this stuff is pretty much in his blood. If you didn't know, his dad, James Brolin, was the main character in the original Amityville horror movie from 1979. Also a movie about weird stuff happening at an exact time in the middle of the night, too. So kind of funny coincidence there. But I mean, Josh, from the Goonies to Avengers, to the stuff in Dune, all the other work that he's done over the years, to stuff like this. I just think he's a very, very talented actor. He loves his craft. I think he works really hard as an actor as well, and you can see that come across on screen. And I think he really works in this movie. He's at the right age, the right time in his career where his character in this movie, I think, is very, very effective. He plays this dad who's this contractor in town who's really pissed about what happened to his son, and he wants to figure out what happened. And as a dad of a 5 and a 7-year-old myself, yeah, you bet your ass I would be doing some of the stuff that he does in this movie. I would not give a shit about boundaries with the police or the local people in town. None of that stuff. I would be spending morning and night investigating this shit. But with that said, I do think they kind of fumbled the bag a little bit with Josh's character Archer in this movie. I do think we should have spent a little bit more time with his character, with his journey, instead of some of the extra time that we got with some of the other characters in this movie, just for me personally. But I'll talk about that more in just a second. I also think the personality of Josh's character in this movie also mixes really well with Julia Garner's character Justine in this movie. She's this teacher who, seems like she really loves her job as a teacher, really loves her students and wants to see, wants the best for them and all of that. But in her personal life, though, she's also kind of a mess. She drinks all the time and is just kind of a little wild for an elementary school teacher. But I also think they do an effective job of making Justine's story, especially early on in the movie, just ambiguous enough. You know, who she is, what she's up to, just everything about her life. I just think it's just ambiguous enough. And I also think they did a good job with that, of making it ambiguous enough with the kids who didn't disappear, the families around this town, and the eeriness with some of the stuff with them, especially in the first half of that movie. You can tell there's just something not right. There's something going on. And for me personally, I think they did a good job of not giving us too much, but just enough early on that left me kind of, excited for the rest of the movie. Another thing that kept me around and kept me engaged during the story is kind of like Barbarian. This movie also takes you on some side journeys that makes you think immediately, okay, what the hell are we doing? This feels like it has nothing at all to do with the story that I feel like I came here for, yet somehow I'm still engaged because I'm like, all right, I gotta see how the hell they're gonna tie this story back into a story ultimately about 17 kids mysteriously disappearing. Like, for example, we follow this young homeless addict for a big portion of this movie, which I'm sure for a lot of you who have seen the movie, probably also kind of caught you off guard, which, by the way, that guy, he plays a very believable young homeless addict, in my opinion. Now, and I'm not talking about like the older homeless guy you'll see on the streets with no teeth. No, I'm talking about like the young homeless guy who's just on that grind to get that next high. I mean, this is coming from somebody who has somebody in their family who is an addict. That person has spent some time being homeless along the way. And me personally, I have spent some time searching up in Oregon, searching through some of the tents, looking through some of these compounds, looking for that family member just to make sure they're alive and just to make sure, they're doing okay. And I'll tell you, some of the people that you meet along the way, especially the younger ones, I mean, they are just like this guy. Now, I mentioned Barbarian a little bit earlier, and just to kind of talk about the two movies in comparison, because Barbarian was obviously like that movie that really put Zach Cregger as a writer and director on the map, and this is supposed to be like his next big thing, especially because it has 10 times the budget. But I do think this particular story in Weapons, for me personally, is just way more interesting just for me, in my opinion, and the things that I can kind of relate to, being a dad, this stuff with suburbia and all of that. I mean, I have stayed in plenty of Airbnbs. Yes, that is in Barbarian. That's a part of the story as well, which is definitely relatable as well. But, Barbarian's just kind of this story of like an Airbnb gone wrong and just like this weird history, behind the history of the house. It's fine. Like the overall just the story in Barbarian. But I do think just in comparison, this movie, the story, the idea, the concept, the acting, how it's executed, I mean, like I said, 10 times the budget, so probably should be. But I do think it's just way more interesting for me. Now, I will say there are some moments in this movie, especially in the second half of the movie, where I was sitting in my chair thinking to myself, okay, you got to give me a little bit more here. I think it's time. You got to just give me some answers here. I don't think we've gotten quite enough. I mean, the ambiguity and the mystery, like that's all great, especially in the first half of the movie, but we're kind of getting to that point where I need a little something here. I'm kind of getting hungry, and you got to give me a little bit of just a kind of a nugget of something. And like I mentioned just a second ago, I do think some of the chapters, some of the moments with some of the characters could have been trimmed down just a little bit. I didn't hate it. Might be a little bit more of a nitpick, but I think in particular, just Josh Brolin's story. I mean, I also really enjoyed his character, and he's also a great actor, so that probably adds a little something to it. But like I mentioned a second ago, I do wish we would have spent a little bit more time with the kind of angle of the story of piecing together the clues to figure out what's going on here, because I feel like in kind of the later stages of the movie, it just kind of gets thrown into the face of the characters. I wish we would have spent a little bit more time with like the investigative side of this story, because just for me personally, I just kind of eat that stuff up. I feel like they could have added more onto Josh Brolin's side and then just kind of trimmed down some of the moments with some of the other characters. Now, in the end, I enjoyed the ending of this movie, but with that said, I don't think they nailed the end of this movie, nor did they nail kind of the second half of this movie, the unveil, the reveal, the mystery, the answers that we were looking for in this movie. I don't think they really nailed that. The second half, just where we get more answers and all of that. I don't think it was pulled off all that well. Now, the first half, for me personally, I think is where this movie really works for me. I think they executed just like the mystery and the eeriness of all of that. And of course, the actors just pulling all of that off also, added something to that. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the second half of this movie really came home in the way that I wished it would have. In some ways, it's also kind of a repeat of Barbarian in some of the moments. If you've seen both movies, you'll probably know what I'm talking about, whereas this movie is definitely more supernatural. But if you've seen both movies, like I said, you'll notice some similarities. So I don't love that. Now, that's kind of a bit of a nitpick because obviously same director and all of that. So there's going to be some similarities, but it was probably a little bit too similar for my taste. But also, there is definitely some gore in the second half of this movie. I mean, that peeler scene with the face, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, damn. Another gripe that I do have with this movie, especially with the technology that they show that a lot of people in this town have, I don't know. It just makes it feel very unbelievable to me that this mystery and just trying to figure out what happened to these kids lasted so long. Like, I feel like they should have solved this way earlier than they did. Also, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but just to really nail it home, I mean, the ultimate mystery, the ultimate, like, what the hell happened to these kids? What is responsible for them vanishing, disappearing, or just acting the way that they did, running out of their house in the middle of the night at this specific time? The ultimate reveal with all of that, to me, it's not that mind-blowing. I mean, it's just really not. I feel like it's pretty basic. I mean, the ultimate just cause behind all of this, I feel like it's a story we've seen before. But with that said, for some reason, a lot of movies that have a terrible tragedy or something happen in a town or whatever have you, the ultimate demise of whatever is responsible for that, sometimes movies make that kind of lackluster, just like the revenge or what ultimately happens to them, kind of lackluster, like I said, which is kind of weird to me. But in this movie, it's really not. Whatever is behind all of this, if you haven't seen the movie yet, and if you have seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, obviously. I feel like the ultimate ending is pretty satisfying in that regard. I also appreciated in this movie how they portray this idea of, okay, when something tragic happens to a town or to a person or to a family, whatever have you, in the end, whether it's a happy ending or a sad ending, regardless of what happens with that, you don't really snap your fingers and then everybody just forgets about it and moves on and just, kind of tucks their trauma down below. No, I appreciated in this movie that there's going to be lingering effects with everything that happened in this movie. Like I said, whether it's a happy ending or a sad movie, the effects are more lingering. This is going to take some time to get over this or whatever happened at the end of it. It's just going to take some time, and I appreciated that they went with that angle because I think that's just way more believable. So did I think Weapons was good? Yeah, I thought it was good. Was it great? I mean, the first half was pretty close to being great. The second half, like I mentioned just a second ago, the finality of all of it, the answers to this big mystery, not so much for me. I thought that angle of the story was a little bit more generic. I thought that was stuff that I'd seen before many, many times. So yeah, I would say Weapons is a bit overhyped. Like I said, this movie for me really excels in the cast, in the acting, the setting, the mood, the atmosphere in this town, especially at night, and just the mystery of this movie, of this story, especially in that first half of the movie. And they also do a really good job just making me feel like I'm one of the parents in this situation, on this journey with them. All really great stuff, but like I mentioned, I wish just the final reveal of everything was a little bit more unique. So yeah, I would definitely recommend seeing Weapons, especially if you're a horror fan, especially if you're a parent like me. I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff in this movie that'll really work for you. And I think overall this movie is really well done. And especially in what I consider a pretty shit year for movies in 2025 thus far, just in general. It's definitely one of the best horror movies thus far of the year by a mile. All right, everybody, that is my review of Weapons. And by the way, I did just move. If you missed that post, this is not my permanent studio setup or anything like that. This is just a temporary setup. There are boxes all over the place. Everything is a mess. So this is just a temporary setup until I get my office all set up in particular. But thanks for being patient while there's been kind of a gap in video uploads over the past week or so, something like that. So appreciate that. More videos coming very, very soon as the move kind of gets finalized and all of that. But again, thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you want some more videos from me, go ahead and check out one of these videos next to me. If you don't want to miss future videos on the channel, best way to do that is to make sure you subscribe. All of my social media links are down below in the description. And again, if you've seen Weapons, let me know down in the comments down below what you thought about the movie. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you kind of in the middle about it? Let me know down in the comments down below. Like this video if you did enjoy it. Really does help me out a lot. But anyways, everybody, thanks again for watching. My name is Matt, and I will talk to you in the next one.